Hello folks, this is Ryan the Tech Guy, and today we are going to be discussing overclocking your NVIDIA graphics card. The new NVIDIA graphics cards are fairly easy to overclock, and the procedure is fairly straightforward, although there are a couple of things to watch to make sure that you don't damage your card. First things first, you're going to need three pieces of software. You're going to need EVGA Precision X or MSI Afterburner. I'll get into that shortly. You're going to need GPU-Z, and you're going to need some type of benchmarking tool. For this example, I prefer Heaven's Benchmark. All three links for all three pieces of software will be in the description below. As far as the EVGA Precision or MSI Afterburner, what you want to do is download the software that corresponds to your card. So that is, I happen to have an EVGA GeForce 980 in my machine. So as a result of that, I'm going to use EVGA's overclocking software. It would be the same if I had an MSI card, that an MSI NVIDIA GeForce 980, I would use MSI Afterburner. I don't have any concrete evidence that you need to use one or the other, but I myself notice better stability performance when I use the program associated with my manufacturer. The next thing you want to open is a program called GPU-Z, and what this will do is it will show you the different statistics on your card. So for right here at the bottom, it gives me my default clock speeds, my default memory clock, and my default boost clock. We're going to use this to confirm that the overclocking software actually does perform the overclock and that your card is in fact running at a higher clock speed. The third piece of software we need is Heaven Benchmark. And what that's going to do is that's going to bring up a benchmarking utility. I always run mine on extreme, and I do not run it full screen because my main monitor is a 4K display. So I run it in a higher resolution than 1080p, except I run it in a windowed mode so that I can see it on my 4K display. You're going to use these to test the stability and to test the visual appearance of your card while under an overclock. So let's get right into the actual procedure now that we have these three programs open. In EVGA Precision or MSI Afterburner, whichever program you choose to use, you're going to have several things that you need to pay attention to. Over here on the left, I have my fan speed, and I have a custom fan curve that I've designed to have my fans turn on sooner to ensure that my card stays cooled. It's important to know that my card is not liquid cooled, it's simply air cooled, and I'm able to manage its temperature safely by using an adjusted fan curve. In fact, I didn't even need to use this fan curve. My card ran within the safe threshold even without altering this, but just for safety's sake and for prolonged uses, I adjusted my fan curve. The sound in my office doesn't bother me at all, although it's not that loud to begin with. Over here, you're going to have the fan speed. On the right, you're going to have the voltage, and in the center here, you're going to have the crux of the program, which has the four main operators that you're going to be changing. The first one you want to start with is power target. This is how much your card is actually going to be pulling from your motherboard, how much power it's going to be pulling. When it means power, it means how much the card is actually going to try and work. This does not correspond to the voltage. That is an important distinction that I want to make right away. You can take this power target slider and drag it all the way up to 124, and this is not going to be an action that fries your card. Your card would be physically ruined by overvolting over here on the right side. We're going to talk about voltages a little bit later. But for right now, what you need to know is that the power target percentage here in the center is not a variable that will burn your card out. You can run this at 124% all of the time, so long as your other settings are within line. What I like to do just to ensure that my card doesn't get too hot is I click this button over here that says priority. And what this will do is this will manage your clock speed so that you don't overheat your card. A lot of the different temperatures are going to depend on the environment you find yourself in. Does your computer, the actual box itself, have proper ventilation and proper cooling and proper airflow? That is going to determine how hot your card runs while under the overclock. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click this and make it so that it's selecting the temperature, and then I'm simply going to lower it. In fact, this will be a good example. I'm going to lower it to 82 degrees. I don't ever want my card to spike above 82 degrees Celsius. Now, I believe NVIDIA from the manufacturer says that anything under 90 degrees Celsius will be okay as long as it's in short bursts. I don't want to take that chance. I want to ensure that my card downclocks its speed if it starts to get too hot. You'll notice that when I dragged the temperature slider back, it also decreased the power level, and that's because of this icon over on the left. This icon allows you to link or delink your power target and your temperature variables. That's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to open that link. I'm going to leave the GPU target temperature at 82 degrees Celsius, and I'm going to max out my power target. The next thing you want to do is increase your GPU clock offset. I just set it here to 100. The slider obviously goes really high and really low, and you most likely will not be using this entire range of values, and the sensitivity is incredibly sensitive. So one of the things you can also do is click on the number, type in whatever specific value you want, and press the Enter key, and that will lock it in. At this time, what you want to do is click Apply. You want to ensure that in GPU-Z you are in fact getting the boost that you are asking for. So for example, right here I'm asking for 100 more megahertz on the GPU clock, and you can see that my boost clock is in fact 100 higher, as is my GPU clock. My GPU clock is exactly 100 more than my default clock. The same is true for my boost clock. The next thing you want to do is actually test this setting and make sure it's stable, and you want to do so by running Heaven. I'm going to skip this part of the procedure because this will be independent for everyone that's doing it on their own. Every time you make a change to one of these sliders, you want to then test the stability of that change by running Heaven from start to finish. It will pump out a score at the end, and you will be able to use that score to compare what one batch of settings does versus the next batch. I happen to know that my card can go a lot higher than this. In fact, I've pre-programmed in a setting here. This is the highest that I can get my card to run. I test this using Witcher 3, which is perhaps the most graphic-intensive application I have on my computer, and I'm able to play without any type of artifacting on the actual video product. The game doesn't crash. My video drivers don't crash. This is the maximum setting for me. I want to specify that this will be different depending on the user. So my settings may not be the same as yours. These cards, although they're made by a machine, they're not always exactly the same. Some cards, can get a little bit more power out of it. Some can't. It depends on your case setup. It depends on the cooling that you have. Some cards just bin out higher than others. So you want to make sure that you find the setting that works best for you. Again, what you want to do is increase your GPU clock by 100 blocks until you get a graphics card crash, and then you want to back it off by blocks of 50. Once you do that, you can then lower it, back it off by blocks of 25, and so on all the way down until you find the maximum number on your GPU clock offset. Once you've obtained your maximum number on your GPU clock offset, you can do the same thing for your memory offset. I did this by increasing it by 100, so I started at plus 100, and then I did plus 200, and then I did plus 300, and then I did plus 400, testing it all along the way with Heaven. When I got to 400, my computer passed the test on Heaven, but when I ran Witcher, it actually crashed Witcher out. So I backed off my memory clock setting a little bit, and I have not had a crash since. This is essentially the procedure in overclocking. You want to adjust your settings until you can't run them anymore, and that's where the voltage comes in. I saved this for last because this is perhaps one of the most damaging options that you have while overclocking your video cards. I recommend for beginners that you do not overvolt your card at all. Simply don't do it. Ensure that this voltage meter stays at 0 and alter these settings accordingly. What I did here is when I first started testing this card, I left it at 0. When I got up to around these numbers, I believe the number was 250, 250, maybe even 275, and then 400 on the memory clock. I realized that my card was it was working, it was producing good graphics sometimes, but then it would crash, almost like it couldn't quite get over that final hump. So what I did was I slightly increased my voltage. This tells the motherboard to give your card more power. That's more amps, that equals more heat, and that equals the potential to damage your card. If you are new to this, you do not want to overvolt your card. You want to save overvolting your card until you're more comfortable with the settings and then obtaining those safe settings. Once you feel comfortable in obtaining these safe settings, you can try overvolting your card, but again, remember that this can be damaging and you must do this as minimally as possible. You'll notice that when I click the up button on here, or when I drag it up, one tick corresponds to 6 millivolts. So I don't want to type in a custom value of 5 because the program is telling me that it increases in 6 millivolt selections. So I want to leave this here. This is one of the core differences between MSI Afterburner and EVGA Precision. I noticed in MSI Afterburner I could simply I could drag the voltage meter anywhere I wanted and overvolt my card any way that I chose. When I switched over to EVGA, I noticed that it had specific increments in the in those volts, and when I adhered to those increments, I got better stability out of it. So after trial and error, I have arrived at my stable overclocking settings, plus 270 on the GPU clock and plus 390 on the memory clock. This corresponds to a 24% increase in my GPU clock speed and a 32% increase in my memory clock speed.